This program is comprised of two parts. First, a product introduction, followed by a product demonstration. DEC Vuit, digital's visual user interface tool. It's easy to see why it's better. Because with DEC Vuit, what you see is what they get. DEC Vuit is the tool for experienced developers that provides more than representations of the user interface. It creates real widgets, and the developers watch the program come to life. DEC Vuit is based on OSF Motif. It runs on VMS and Ultrix, including VAX VMS, VAX Ultrix, and RISC Ultrix. DEC Vuit is also supported on non-digital platforms, including SunSpark stations. DEC Vuit helps developers meet users' needs. Scott Smith, principal software engineer, tells us what users are looking for.
Before there were windowing interfaces and complex toolkits, people still had to write interfaces for their programs, but those interfaces tended to be fairly simple. The world now is quite a bit different, and that's good for users of computers, because the people who are using Motif programs today find that those programs are much more intuitive, they're very simple to understand. Instead of walking up and starting by reading an immense manual, you see something that very much looks like a physical world on your terminal screen. You see things that look physically like push buttons, and when you press them, they depress, and they have helpful messages on them, and they have things like context-sensitive help and sliders, and it's a very active and responsive world, one where the user is in control of the application rather than the application being in control. If you're a programmer these days, it's the devil of a problem, because these interfaces may be simple to use and even fun to use, but at least in the past, they've been terribly difficult to create. And Vuit is a tool that was specifically designed to simplify that process.
What makes DEC Vuit different? It significantly enhances programmer productivity by replacing the traditional development process of editing, compiling, linking, and debugging, and in its place provides a graphical means of creating OSF Motif UIL, part of the Motif User Interface Standard. Compiling the UIL code produces the User Interface Definition, UID files, which at runtime are read into the Motif Resource Manager, MRM, and converted to widgets on the user's screen. DEC Vuit provides access to all the standard Motif widgets and gadgets, and several digital extensions. Not only that, but developers can incorporate their own widgets into the parts box as well. Specifying values for fonts, colors, and icons becomes a simple task thanks to the Icon Editor, the Color Palette Editor, and the Font List Editor. All these features help DEC Vuit give developers the power to see what the application will present to the user.
In the past, before DEC Vuit was available, as a matter of fact, I used to have to create interfaces very much like the one behind me on the screen by writing lines of either C code or UIL code, which is the user interface language that comes from OSF as part of the Motif Toolkit. And that's a fairly cumbersome process, because what I'm actually trying to specify is a very visual thing. It's an interface on a terminal screen. It's a set of objects. And what I actually ended up trying to specify that in was lots of procedural code and declarative code. It's an unusual mapping. You know, it's not the way people normally like to think about things. When I'm creating something that's inherently visual, I want to do it visually. And that's what Vuit allows me to do.
DEC Vuit has powerful implications for the reuse, modification, and maintenance of existing applications, regardless of the platform they originated on. Ernie Johnston, DEC Vuit Marketing Manager, explains.
One of the big advantages of Vuit is the ability to not only write UIL code, but Vuit also allows you to read UIL code. So we can import a UIL file from some other vendor, let's say, that supports the industry standard OSF motif, and that UIL file will then be read by Vuit and then displayed in our work area, and then we can then make modifications to that particular file.
Many companies, digital certainly included, has lots and lots of lines of UIL code in existence. Vuit simply reads these. Vuit is able to import any UIL specification of an interface that is able to be accepted by the OSF UIL compiler itself. In fact, we use the OSF UIL compiler to accomplish this.
The result? The application development team experiences almost immediately 3 major benefits: increased productivity, enhanced quality, and improved user satisfaction. Programmers understand DEC Vuit almost from the very start because it's intuitive. The savings in time and effort begin immediately. The cost of purchasing DEC Vuit is often repaid during development of your first application.
We found through our market research that between 50 to 90% of the time that's necessary to develop an application for a workstation goes into the creation of the graphical user interface. And so by doing anything that we can to decrease the time that is necessary to create the graphical user interface, we have done a great job in increasing the productivity of the developer.
I think anyone could walk up to the product and create some simple applications very rapidly. But Vuit goes beyond that. It's easy, I think, to create simple applications. It's very simple for a person to kind of create a prototype application and convince you that this is a tool that's really going to make your life a lot easier. The proof of the pudding is when you've been using a tool for a month and you're creating a real application and trying to decide if you're satisfied with the tool after that. And I think it's there that Vuit really does a very good job.
DEC Vuit also helps developers reach new levels of quality faster than any text-oriented approach could hope for.
Since Motif is using the actual widgets when you're creating them in the DEC Vuit work area, then what you're actually using is you're using the toolkit itself, the Motif toolkit, to create these widgets and to work with them. So it exhibits exact toolkit behavior, which means that the quality of your work is going to be much better than if you actually sat down and programmed this with an editor in either C or UIL.
As for user satisfaction, DEC Vuit separates form from function, and that gives new meaning to the developer-end-user partnership.
By bringing the users in ahead of time at the very beginning of the product cycle, you can find that the input is very cost-effective to implement at that particular time, and the engineers aren't stressed by having a user say, gee, I'd like to have this button moved over here, and things of that nature. And we find that the end users then are much more happy with the product that they see on the other end when they've had a chance to have input in the very beginning.
DEC Vuit. It's the productive, creative, and truly visual user interface tool for your programming team. If you are looking to increase your programmer productivity, enhance the quality of your Motif applications, and improve your end-user satisfaction, DEC Vuit is the answer. Once you've seen it in action, you'll never look at application development the same way again. For product information, please call 1-800-343-4040, extension 333. A product demonstration follows. DEC Vuit is a WYSIWYG-style editor for building interfaces to applications that conform to OSF Motif. DEC Vuit provides an interactive interface to an industry-standard UIL compiler and the Motif toolkit. DEC Vuit makes excellence a little easier to achieve. Scott Smith, Principal Software Engineer, tells us how.
The person who would be using it would be a person like myself, a programmer trying to create applications with fairly sophisticated windowing interfaces. Potentially a user might also be an interface designer, if a company had such a category of person. But basically, it's a tool that allows a person to create all of the visual aspects of an application and do that visually rather than writing lines and lines of code in order to create the same interface.
DEC Vuit eliminates the need for the cumbersome manual entry of code and instead provides a graphical, interactive means of creating UIL files. Compiling the UIL code produces the User Interface Definition, UID files, which at runtime are read into the Motif Resource Manager, MRM, and converted to widgets on the user's screen. That's DEC Vuit on the conceptual level. We asked Scott to give us a chance to see DEC Vuit at work. Scott starts by building a main window. He chooses that part from the many in the parts box and drags it into the work area. He names it and resizes it to the shape he wants. When he adds the menu bar, it automatically snaps to the top of the main window. We asked him why that happens.
The reason for this is that what we're seeing in the work area of DEC Vuit here isn't a simulation of the Motif widgets. They're the actual Motif widgets. So we see the actual behavior of these things as they will show up in our final application, and we don't have to wait.
Scott now continues to demonstrate the process of building a simple application using DEC Vuit.
So now we have our main window here, and perhaps we'd like to build a menu bar. So we go here and grab a cascade button and place it in the menu bar. Inside a cascade button, we'll probably want to put a pull-down menu. Inside a pull-down menu, we'll probably want to put a push button. And I can rapidly duplicate these push buttons by using an accelerator here, or I can simply use the duplication function from the main window menu bar and put it here. And building a menu bar is really as simple as that. If I want to change the names, the text fields that show up on this menu bar, I simply select the button that I'm interested in, hit mouse button 3, and I'll call this first menu entry file. If I wanted to call this last entry exit, I'd select it. I'd type exit. If we want to put a pull right into this menu bar, all we do is we grab another cascade button and we put it into the menu pull down. If I don't like the positioning of it, I can directly manipulate this to change its position and put the cascade button anywhere I like. Grab another pull down menu, drop it on top of the cascade button, and put some more push buttons in there.
To work on another part of the interface, Scott hides the menu he's created and selects an arrow button. And, by clicking on the arrow, brings up the widget editor. DEC Vuit creates widgets with user-defined default resources. From the widget editor, Scott pulls down the Edit menu and adds 2 more resources, arrow direction and background color. DEC Vuit only displays resources that are legal for this widget instance. With a pop-up menu, Scott can modify the direction of the arrow very easily. Included with DEC Vuit is the industry's most sophisticated color editor. Scott is presently using the Picker color model to select and then mix colors. Once the selected colors are smeared to produce a 10-shade spectrum, then the intensity can be increased or decreased, and the spectrum can be made warmer or cooler to obtain the desired final color. The Color Palette Editor supports 5 color models: Picker, HLS, or Hue Lightness Saturation, RGB, red, green, blue, Browser, and Grayscale. If Scott was doing his development on a black and white monitor, he could use the Browser color model to select color attributes by their standard X window system defined name. Or he could use the RGB color model and select colors by RGB value.
So far, so good. We have a very simple looking application. It has its pull-down menus here. Not all of the text has actually been changed to be as it will be in the final application, but I think it gives you a reasonable feel for what the application could look like. Now let's say we want this button to actually do something. If we're producing a prototype application, it's very likely that by hitting this button, we might want some other portion of the interface to actually pop up.
Scott now modifies the interface to specify the semantic actions which take place as the user interacts with the interface. In this case, he specifies that pressing the arrow button will cause a message box to pop up on the user's screen. He does this first by defining the message box, and then associating the activate callback of the arrow button with the manage action. As Scott does this, he is presented with a list of all the top-level objects defined so far. He then selects the message box to be managed. Scott then generates the code for the application. He does this by selecting Generate Application Code in C. DEC Vuit generates the build process as well as the UIL and C, which implements this application. Scott now displays the Generate code in a separate text window. The generated code is efficient, readable, and bug-free. It would likely take a programmer several hours to write the code, which we have generated in just a few minutes. As the interface becomes more complex, the savings become even greater. Scott then executes the generated build procedure, which compiles the UIL and C code to produce a standalone motif application. We now execute this application to verify that it works correctly so far. Using DEC Vuit, it's just this easy to prototype applications and continue to refine these prototypes until the end user is satisfied. As Scott continues to build the interface, he combines labels and text widgets into the beginnings of a simple form. He defines named literal values so that he can share the same positioning information between different objects in the interface. In this case, he makes sure that the label and the text field remain on the same row by sharing the same literal for their Y resource values. He defines a literal called row 1 from the current Y position by selecting Create Literal from the pull-down menu. He references the row 1 literal from the other object by changing the binding from immediate to literal and selecting the literal row 1. If Scott now repositions one of these objects, DEC Vuit recognizes that a shared value will be modified and asks him how to proceed. Modify the object, cancel, or change the binding to immediate. Scott modifies the shared value, and all of the objects which share this value now realign themselves to the new position. DEC Vuit allows values for any resource and data type to be shared among multiple objects, as well as allowing entire lists of resources and values to be shared among multiple objects. By allowing reuse of existing portions of the interface, DEC Vuit creates applications which are both easier to maintain and more efficient. As the application gets larger, DEC Vuit provides a means to navigate through it: the Widget Tree Browser. The Widget Tree Browser shows all the top-level objects, and when they contain children, the entire hierarchy down to the lowest level of the interface definition. Next, Scott invokes the Font Editor to show how DEC Vuit makes it possible to modify the typefaces the user sees. The Font Editor displays typefaces, sizes, and other characteristics such as boldface and italic, which are available on your current server. Scott sees what the typeface will look like and then incorporates it into the user interface. As a last step, Scott adds a Drawn button to the interface of the application and edits it. He adds the background PixMap resource. Editing this resource brings up DEC Vuit's PixMap editor. Scott begins by selecting the red color from his palette. Then he selects the circle object to draw with and creates a circle in the PixMap work area. After centering the icon, he selects the Paint Can option and fills in the icon. He draws the lines and fills them in. Scott has now completed the icon definition. He now adds some label text to the push button definition, which will be superimposed over the PixMap background. Thanks to Scott, we have a clearer idea now of how DEC Vuit simplifies user interface development. But there's a lot more to this story. DEC Vuit makes it possible to quickly build prototypes that look and act like the real thing, because they are the real thing. Increased productivity, enhanced quality, and user satisfaction. DEC Vuit makes it all happen, right before your eyes. For product information, please call 1-800-343-4040, extension 333.